This year, the report emphasizes the national scope of the oil and natural gas industry and identifies the common challenges which we face, and the important leadership role played by the states in the transition of our nation away from the decades of energy scarcity and uncertainty towards an era of energy abundance and security. The report is a snapshot of energy policy as it is today and as it could and should be in the future. In broad terms, the state of American energy is strong, even during this time of what we call realignment. The United States is more energy self-sufficient and has transitioned from an era of energy scarcity and dependence into a global energy leader. Today, the global energy world is realigning, with the United States poised to remain a dominant global player, something that was unforeseen just a decade ago. The energy policy decisions we make today will determine whether this nation remains a positive stabilizing force in the world's energy market and whether consumers can continue to count on reliable, affordable, and abundant domestically produced energy for years to come. Domestically, the 21st century American energy renaissance, which has created an unprecedented surplus of energy, has significantly lowered energy costs for American consumers and delivered a sizable lift to our U.S. economy. For example, the Energy Information Administration estimates that the American consumers have now saved on average $700 in 2015 on transportation fuel costs alone as a result of this abundant energy, and IHS now estimates that the average U.S. income was $1,200 higher in 2012, given lower home energy costs brought about by unconventional development. IHS estimated the figure could reach as much as $3,500 a year per family by 2025. And even during this period of realignment, the oil and gas industry remains an important source of well-paying jobs for millions of Americans. America's oil and natural gas industry supports approximately $1.2 trillion in U.S. gross domestic product. That's the equivalent of the size of the Mexican economy, according to the World Bank. Fortunately, we know how to bring about America's brighter energy future, which means lower costs for American consumers, a cleaner environment, and American energy leadership, because that is today's reality here in the United States. We call it the U.S. model. Simultaneously, the United States is leading the world in energy production. We have one of the strongest Western economies, and we are leading the world in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, a trifecta of success unmatched by any other nation in the world. Our nation's success as a global energy production and carbon reduction leader is rooted in the United States' unique federal system, which allows the states to be an active and semi-autonomous actor when it comes to how its energy resources are developed. Our system of government, working in combination with our long tradition of entrepreneurship and distinctive innovative spirit, has led to world-leading reductions in carbon emissions, now at near 20-year lows. As the State of American Energy Report details, the states demonstrate time and again that the best way forward on energy policy is not through legislative mandate, overreaching regulatory oversight, or executive decree, but by using facts and what we call the U.S. model, including what's worked and what's best for our energy future, the economy, consumers, and the environment as our guiding principles. The states demonstrate how bipartisan compromise, consensus building, and collaboration with industry can lead to significant increases in energy production and environmental protection. Nationally, according to the latest EPA data, In 2013, greenhouse gas emissions were 9% below 2005 levels, even as our population, energy use, and gross domestic product have increased. Proof that the U.S. model is the most effective way to better protect the environment while growing the economy and increasing our energy production. Our nation's emissions are lower as a result of greater use of clean-burning natural gas. And according to a study by T2 Associates, the oil and natural gas industry itself reduced its own greenhouse gas emissions by the equivalent of 55.5 million metric tons of CO2 in 2014, all while dramatically increasing our production right here at home. Further, we in the industry have invested $90 billion in zero and low carbon emitting technologies from 2000 to 2014, almost as much as the entire federal government's investment of $110 billion. We also know what the difference between pro-energy development and anti-energy development will mean to our nation's economy, businesses, families, consumers, and for our environment. Last year, a study by Wood Mackenzie found that with the right energy policies, America's oil and natural gas industry could support as many as an additional 1 million American jobs in 2025 and as many as 2.3 million additional jobs by 2035. The study also looked at the real-world economic difference between pro-development energy policies and anti-development energy policies espoused by some. Specifically, over the next 20 years, pro-development policies could cumulatively increase local, state, and federal government revenue by more than $1 trillion. That's a T. $1 trillion, and boost household discretionary income by as much as $508 billion. Further, average annual household energy expenses could be lowered by approximately $360 per year at the same time. Conversely, national energy policies that discourage energy development and constrain U.S. refiners could lead to a cumulative decrease of $500 billion in government revenue from 2016 to 2035, and increase by $242 the cost of energy annually for the average household. Because, according to the EIA, fossil fuels will account for 80% of U.S. energy consumption through 2040. And the agency estimates that even under the best-case scenario for alternative fuel use, fossil fuels will still account for 78% of our energy needs. This is just another data point in support of the long-standing tenet of energy policy, which is held by most economists, academics, and government analysts. Fossil fuels will remain the foundation upon which our modern society rests for many decades to come. Encouragingly, there is growing support within Congress for this U.S. model, as we like to call it, this style of energy policies. As many in this room are well aware, just last month, as Congress was finishing the people's business before recess, we witnessed a rare glimpse of bipartisanship and forward-looking energy policy on the national level with the lifting of the 40-year ban on crude oil exports. Lifting the ban is a win for American consumers and the economy, according to a recent study by ICF International, which found that lifting this ban could save consumers as much as $5.8 billion per year on fuel costs. Congress's action was a victory of long-term vision and fact-based policymaking over political ideology and ideological dogma. Still, and in spite of all these facts and a wealth of other evidence to the contrary, there are an ardent few who continue to believe that keeping our nation's abundant energy resources in the ground is a credible and viable national energy strategy. There are some in government who will advance their favorite forms of energy to the dubious and untested end, heedless of the potential harm it could cause to our economy, or how much cost it would impose on consumers, or how it could impede continued environmental improvement. For example, ignoring clear consumer preference and in spite of current record levels of production and refining, EPA continues to push the renewable fuel standard, a relic of our nation's era of energy scarcity and uncertainty. A 2014 Congressional Budget Office study projected that the RFS could raise the cost of fuel prices because, quote, given the design of the RFS, the cost of encouraging additional sales of high ethanol fuel falls on producers and consumers of gasoline and diesel, end quote. What's more, there's very little consumer demand for these high ethanol fuels. According to the EIA, the annual amount of E85 that was sold in 2014 is less than 1% of the annual gasoline demand. The reason is simple. Ethanol is less energy dense than gasoline, and as a result provides fewer miles per gallon. The laudable goals of the RFS, less dependent on imported fuel, lower gasoline prices, and reduced emissions, have largely been achieved through industry innovation and market forces. It is well past time that we end or significantly amend the renewable fuel standard. It is a relic of our nation's era of energy dependence that poses a direct threat to our nation's economy, risks reversal of important environmental improvements, as concluded by the National Academy of Sciences, and could raise energy costs for American consumers. Another example is the Clean Power Plan, which under the guise of environmental protection does in fact seek to pick winners and losers in the energy market, not based on market conditions, consumer preference, or economic reality. The reality is that the approach of the rule is to propose a regulation-based solution for a problem that is already being successfully addressed in the marketplace. And the treatment of natural gas is a good example. The administration routinely acknowledges that greater use of natural gas in power generation has not only led to greater greenhouse gas emission reductions than any other nation, but that it has been a, quote, game changer, end quote, in reducing other air pollution. And the president rightly highlights that we have far more than 100 years' worth of natural gas abundance. Yet in releasing the Clean Power Plan last summer, the White House talking points bragged, quote, the rush to natural gas is eliminated, end quote, presumably a means to spur more renewable energy. In 2015, there were several months in which natural gas produced more electricity than any other fuel for the first time in U.S. history. By no coincidence, that period also saw the lowest carbon emissions from the power sector. And far from reducing opportunity for wind and solar power, natural gas provides the reliable baseload power necessary to integrate those intermittent sources. States and electric utilities are required to provide clean, reliable, and affordable energy. Natural gas will continue to provide all three, with or without the Clean Power Plan. More broadly, however, the Clean Power Plan could further drive up costs for consumers who live in regions of the country who pay more than they should for energy they need because of the growing strain on our energy infrastructure. The EIA estimated that New England residents paid up to 69% more for their electricity than the national average just last winter. And the industrial sector has paid up to 90% more for its electricity than the national average, in part because of infrastructure limitations. Much of these limitations are the result of a dangerous combination of outdated policies and anti-fossil fuel ideology that discourages American companies from investing in tomorrow's pipelines, marine terminals, and other needed energy infrastructure. Emboldened by their ability to stop the Keystone XL pipeline, anti-fossil fuel advocates have set their sights on all energy infrastructure projects. Their arguments against this energy infrastructure project are not based on economic merit or on true environmental impact. And the decision to reject the pipeline simply ignores the pipeline's many benefits, including strengthened ties to one of our closest trading allies, Canada, the creation of thousands of well-paying jobs, the generations of millions of local, state, and federal tax revenue, and the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in developing Canadian oil sands that have been achieved to date. Keystone is a good example how facts can be stubborn things that take little heed of political ideology or preconceived notions. In this case, the stated reason for denying the Keystone XL pipeline was environmental protection. However, that was contradicted by the administration's own State Department report, which concluded that after 7 long years and 5 comprehensive reports, that the denial of this pipeline would actually increase carbon emissions by 42% due to an increase in truck, rail, and barge traffic needed to transport oil sands to Gulf Coast oil refineries. The oil is finding its way to the marketplace through alternative means, and as they concluded prior to that decision, it has increased carbon emissions 42% as a result of that unfortunate denial. The demonization of the Keystone XL pipeline remains a powerful cautionary tale of the dangers of energy policy driven by ideology rather than economic reality, and has a chilling effect on expansion efforts for our nation's energy infrastructure. That's not just bad national energy policy, it is also bad news for our nation's economy. According to an IHS study, the amount of energy sector infrastructure needed through the middle of next decade could spur $1.15 trillion in private capital investment. $1.15 trillion in private capital investment. IHS also projects that infrastructure investment could support more than 1.1 million American jobs nationally, contribute $120 billion to U.S. gross domestic product, and increase revenues to government by more than $27 billion through 2025. And finally, another example of why policy matters when it comes to energy is the glaring difference between energy production on state-controlled and federally controlled lands. Federal data shows crude oil production remained flat between 2009 and 2014 on federally controlled land, while natural gas production declined 35%. By contrast, on private and state lands where development does not need permission from the federal government, production increased 88% for crude and 43% for natural gas. These dramatically different trend lines are a function of political ideology, not geology. All 3 examples underscore not only how energy policy affects energy production, but also how changes in energy production affect the lives and livelihoods of us all. And that highlights a central fact that is often lost in the energy policy debate: that energy from fossil fuels is, and for decades to come, will be fundamental to our society. And as a result, the policies we put in place in that area will have repercussions well beyond the wellhead, the pumping station, or the refineries. They have real-world impacts on American families, on small businesses, on our environment, and on our communities. As the President's last full year in office begins, we hope that he will take note of and help foster what we like to call the U.S. model. We hope that he'll note that the already heavy regulatory burden, almost 100 pending regulations on the oil and gas industry and counting, upon the oil and gas industry could hinder rather than advance what he hopes to be one of the administration's defining legacies, environmental improvement. And while the outcome of November's election is far from clear, it is certain that no matter who becomes the 45th President of the United States, he or she will take a nation that is first in oil and natural gas production, first in refining ever cleaner fuels, and first in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. They will also have a choice to continue the United States' positive role of energy abundance, global leadership, domestic economic opportunity, and environmental improvement, or to dismantle the progress we've made by implementing policies born from ideology and unmoored to science or to facts. And if the past is indeed prologue as the November elections approach, our nation's civil discourse on our most pressing national issues will likely include energy. Our Vote for Energy voter education campaign will keep the national energy discussion hopefully above the hyperpartisanship of a presidential election year. Vote for Energy focuses on what unites us as a nation and seeks to drive national energy discussion that's focused on facts that are smart, responsible, pro-energy policies and what they mean for American jobs, a stronger economy, a better environment, and continued global energy leadership. And it will focus on the facts, will focus on the future, and empower voters with the information they need to understand where those who seek to lead us stand on America's energy future. Vote for Energy and our industry's central message is straightforward. Energy is fundamental to our society, and thanks to American innovation and entrepreneurial spirit, the United States stands as the world's leader in energy production and environmental improvement, and will remain a global energy leader only if we get our nation's energy policy right today and tomorrow. There will be those whose rhetoric and contributions to the national energy policy conversation consist only of personal attacks, misinformation, and political polemics that attempt to reduce the discussion to a set of false choices. We will instead work toward proven, realistic solutions as demonstrated by the facts of the U.S. model. In this new year, let us all resolve to work together toward a shared vision of a world where everyone, without regard to zip code, state, nation, continent, or hemisphere, has access to reliable, safe, and affordable energy. And it will keep the energy conversation focused on what's most important: energy's role in increasing American prosperity, long-term job creation and economic opportunity, coupled with environmental improvements and enhanced national security. Our goal is to keep the positive momentum of the last few years and to end the politicalization of energy for petty partisan ends. We want to foster a national energy policy discussion that remains above the partisan fray and immune from the misinformation campaign deployed by fervid critics of fossil fuels. Because the reality is that no single source of energy will alone solve our problems or is the source of all of our woes. Moreover, no group holds all the answers or the solutions to the challenges that we face. What history has taught us is that America prospers most when we work together for the common good. I continue to believe and hope that all of us ultimately have the same goal: to leave our community, our nation, and our world better than we found it for the next generation. They deserve nothing less than our collective best efforts to that end, and they are counting on us to put into place realistic policies that enhance our nation's energy security and national security, and while at the same time promoting job creation and responsible environmental stewardship, economic growth, and status as a global energy leader. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take a few questions. Thank you very much.